this episode, I sit down with Jonathan Leonard, or Johnny as I know him, and we talk about a project he's working on in West Virginia, which is really exploring what is life going to be like after coal. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi and Water. Johnny, welcome to Wi-Fi and Water. How is life?
Life's pretty good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And we are here to talk about the Sludge Hub. And you've been posting a lot on LinkedIn, and I saw something that said, imagining life after coal. And I was like, I got to know more. And I know that you've been working on this for a while because I saw a post that you put up on Facebook, probably more than a year ago at this point, where you kind of just checked in with people and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Check out these photos. And I'm glad that we're able to connect now. So talk to us about the Sludge Hub. When was it created and what is it?
The Sludge Hub was born out of pandemic angst. Everyone sort of deals with turbulence in different ways. And just the kind of person I am is I'm like a very angsty person. I always got to be doing something. So I just found myself with a lot of time on my hands. You know, I had a job where I got a job as like an eco auditor, where I signed up to essentially pound around and rock up to, industrial facilities and measure their carbon footprints and make sure they're not chopping down the rainforest and stuff. And so it was a good role for me because I was out and about and got to see tons of people and go to different places. And then the pandemic just like crushed it. So all of a sudden I was doing like 7-hour Zoom audits instead, and it was just killing me. So I needed something to do with my life essentially at that time. So I don't know what really got me started in terms of trying to move into the post-coal space. It just seemed like there was massive opportunities there, given the number of companies that were exiting and the amount of physical spaces that were being abandoned. It just seemed like somewhere that was ripe for setting something up. So I sort of started percolating on it, started doing all sorts of kind of research and how I could get involved in the post-coal mine space. And that's when I sort of started to decide that I wanted to take on a project like this.
And when you talk about spaces opening and those spaces creating new opportunities that haven't been there for a long time or since coal was there, what type of space are we talking about? Are we just talking about mines, or I am assuming that there's large acreage, like large swaths of land now throughout what I guess we would call coal country that are kind of having to grapple with the fact that coal is definitely on its way out or has already left the building. And I've seen some of this firsthand in Colombia, in coffee country, because like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, Colombia was rocking with coffee. But then when that left, it created a vacuum that was sucked everything up into it. And a lot of opportunities kind of went with it. And then other people have come in. And so they've done different ways, they've tried to take those opportunities and continue to move them forward to hopefully help the local communities. Because not everyone can get up and leave like some of the companies that drop in to do some of the production. So what type of land are we talking about? Because when I think of coal country and I think of like the Appalachian Trail and Appalachia, and that's a very big swath of land in the United States or North America, really, I should say. So how big is this space basically where you saw opportunity?
Oh man. So physically it is massive, and the number of abandoned mines is staggering. It's tens of thousands of mines that have been abandoned. So culturally, I was super drawn to West Virginia, and that has to do with just the sheer number of mines, but also just like a love of the culture there, a love of the people, and just like the crazy yeehaw attitude. Like I love rednecks, and I love ripping around on ATVs with rednecks, and I love, their attitude and the music and Hank Williams III. And I just, it seemed like sort of the last frontier versus places like, Ohio or Pennsylvania, which, probably pretty cool, but wasn't quite doing it in terms of being really out there in a space where you can really kind of push the boundaries of what anyone's ever seen before. So that was sort of one of the perks of operating in that area was that there was going to be no zoning, there was going to be essentially no law, and that was going to allow us to build a space and build a community that isn't like anything anyone's ever seen. That was sort of unique.
We're in West Virginia. What part of West Virginia, and how much space? Or I think you bought, and once again, I think you bought a mine, or you bought the land of a mine. And now, is there a physical space there? Are there people there currently? And how is pandemic kind of playing with your plans to continue probably to grow that community?
Right. So, I mean, it's been tireless, but it's also been methodical. So I, reached out to various water protection groups and environmental organizations who had all sorts of like data on what kinds of grants there were available and what kinds of lands qualified for those grants and where they were located. So I got my hands on like a geo map of all the abandoned mines essentially across the coal fields, and then just started methodically trespassing on hundreds of people's properties.
but like, okay, so but what does that look like? Because I'm picturing Johnny with the back. I'm picturing like a Chris McCandless situation where you're just kind of frontiering, and you're just looking at whether it's your iPhone or you actually have a physical map, and you're just kind of using some type of a GIS guidance to be like, oh, let's go check this out. Oh, let's go check this out. Am I spot on?
Oh, totally. And I have just like no idea what's going to be there. You run into like hunting posts that have to like dodge around, or just like impenetrable thickets, or sometimes just giant pits of sludge. And you just never knew until you were going to go. And that was part of the fun. And that was just, there was definitely privilege involved in terms of not worrying as much about getting shot, but it was really engaging, and it was really what I needed to pull through the pandemic. And I essentially made like a Google map or like a Google Earth diagram of every spot, whether it was viable, why it was viable, whether it was accessible, whether, we could imagine, various different types of projects taking place there, and then sort of sifted through them, tried to contact the owners based of the ones that seemed viable using just like creepy online, record lookup type techniques. Most of the land was actually owned by shadow corporations such as the Western Pocahontas Properties Limited Company that made all its money from leasing to the coal mining companies back in the day, and they still hold the land. So that was sort of a dead end, difficult to get in touch with them. Then sort of a lot of the other ones were just like real crazy old dudes who were just like, I'll give up my land never, man. Like, and just ain't never gonna give up that land. And I'm like, it's a damn sludge pit, dude. Like, I'm gonna fix it up. And he said, no. So like, all right. So a lot of dead ends, a lot of a lot of awkward phone calls there, till I finally hit on someone who was a land dealer that had one of these mines that was in a good position for what I wanted to do. And then we forged a relationship, and that's actually who I wound up buying the coal mine from, was this land dealer.
So I've never gone to West Virginia and gone through all the thickets and dealt with the landowners, but what were the, like, I'm trying to grasp and understand, what were the three characteristics that were like most important for land? Maybe you only have two, maybe there's just one, but like, what were the things you were really looking for to create viability in your head for the future project that at the time kind of didn't exist?
Right. So it sort of started coming together slowly, conceptually. And what it sort of started becoming was sort of like a WeWork for mine land restoration projects.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah, I was gonna like set up the facilities needed for researchers to come, and equipment and habitations, whatever they need, in order to do whatever research that they're trying to do at the university, and they need like a pilot site to do. And so it was going to sort of become a backwards facing thing where I would do all sorts of diagnostical testing, see what kinds of heavy metals are in the soils, see what kinds of acid seeps are coming out of the mountainside, and then using those parameters and trolling through various academic databases, doing sort of like a matchmaking and inviting these researchers to come and do this very specific thing that they're trying to do with the very specific conditions that are well suited to the project they're trying to do.
So there wasn't necessarily maybe one thing per se that was going to be super great to have as a characteristic. It was more, you were trying to work, you were already bringing in stakeholders from the university to try to say, all right, what do you guys need from land, and how can I go and basically put in the sweat equity to find the land and maybe create a place where you can come out and do field research, something like that?
Yeah, and I totally dodged that question, so super sorry.
No, you didn't.
And
No, you didn't. There may not be an answer. That's the beauty. You're out there literally creating something out of nothing, and there may not be a kind of a clean cut podcast answer. Like, yeah, I wanted water, sunshine, and good soil.
I wanted damage.
Exactly. Well, exactly. You were looking for, and that's the name of the Sludge Hub. So why the Sludge Hub? Is that just obvious because when you go out there, there's sludge everywhere?
So the Sludge Hub, it comes from like a project that I had in mind as a project of my own that's going to kind of percolate in the background. And this would be a for-profit project. So I stumbled across some research being done at West Virginia University, whereby there's using acid leaching to extract various rare earth elements from sludge. So let me tell you the story of sludge, so you even know what I'm talking about when I talk about sludge. So like what happens in these underground mines is there's what's called fool's gold, like pyrite. And that, when mixed with water, ends up becoming like super acidic. So it like sloshes around inside the mine and it like touches all this soil and it like leaches out all the heavy metals because it's a super low pH solution. So you end up with this water that's got like tons of crazy metals in it, like iron and aluminum and all sorts of rare earth elements actually that are rather hard to accumulate. So then it seeps out of the mine openings and down into the river, and it kills the river. It just kills everything in the river. It dumps all this. As soon as it touches regular water, it dumps all the heavy metals. And you just end up with a river that's like totally laden with heavy metals and fish kills. And it's so bad that it's so acidic that leaves don't even decompose. Like it doesn't even have that much, activity going on. So the way they deal with this is they set up like water treatment stations, some of which are little small dosers out in the middle of nowhere, some of which are like big industrial, like water sanitation looking facilities. And they blast this water with lime or some other basic solution and essentially right the pH and make it around 7 again. And then it drops all the sludge and it drops all the heavy metals. And then they have this thing left over, this sludge that they don't know what to do with. And there's this massive problem where they're just they don't know what to do with this sludge. They're pumping it back into the mines. They're putting in these drying sacks. They're landfilling it. And this guy sort of had figured out that there was a lot of valuable scandium in this sludge, which is used in like it's used for like alloys in the aerospace industry and all sorts of other tech applications. It's just very, very hard to get your hands on. So this is kind of one of the only ways known to get scandium in reasonable amounts. So I was like, oh man, if I can get in on this where I'm sort of like a local sludge pumper man, drying out, getting my scientists to like measure it so I can create certificates of analysis, get it up to spec so that it can go into these facilities, I could become sort of like a local collector and provider of feedstocks for the scandium supply chain in the United States as it develops.
How viable do you feel about that? Because is that something where, the guy who says, hey, I'm never going to sell my land, he could have a bunch of sludge, as you said, and he could actually be sitting on something that he could repurpose into a very rare earth metal, which as we continue into the future and we start building solar panels to put on everyone's roof, we are going to come to another problem where this is a finite resource. Is there a situation where people could actually be sitting on the new gold, they just don't know it, or the whole supply chain isn't created already for them to be able to extract it and then sell it and get, like you said, the certificate of authenticity, etc.? What does that look like? Because it sounds like you could be sitting on the new gold or something that still holds a lot of value that could come from the mountain.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit like that. And the U.S. government particularly is putting a lot of money into like developing the downstream supply chain for the rare earth element industry, mainly because a lot of it goes into like defense spending, to be honest. So that's kind of why they're interested in it. So those facilities just don't really exist yet. So it's like a very long-term vision, and it would be more of like testing and stockpiling for long periods of time, preparing for that day, and just having just like a giant like pile of this stuff ready and up to spec to hit these facilities in the long run. I wouldn't compare it to gold. I compare it to the used cooking oil supply chain. So,
Okay.
Back in the 70s, you heard about, hippies pumping this stuff into their van to run it. So and no one wanted it. It was a waste product. So then now there are just like biodiesel companies that come and pump you out, and the used cooking oil to biodiesel industry is massive. I audit it under the ISCC standard, and it's just like it became like some crap that restaurants were throwing out of their fry later into just like a massive industry. And so I see a lot of similarities between them in terms of just like the abundance of the feedstock, the fact that it's considered a waste product currently, and the fact that just like the use case hasn't been ironed out quite to the point where it's recognized as valuable yet, but it could absolutely be in the not so distant future.
So this is the project that is like your personal percolating project that you probably haven't done much yet with, but maybe in the future you will do. So, it's August 2021. Where's the Sludge Hub currently? You're in Massachusetts. Are there people down in West Virginia? When are you planning on going back to West Virginia?
Oh man, well I can tell you a story of what happened last year. So the landowner I had told you about, the one who was actually a dealer, him and I established like a great relationship. He just, how he has his own weird little mountain fiefdom that he's built, and he just like wheels and deals from his porch, as one does in Appalachia. And so we just go there and just drink shitloads of Crown Royale at like 1 p.m. and, talk about possibilities. And he wanted to make some sort of like redneck resort there,
Wait, what does that look like? Because I'm picturing like Duck Dynasty vibes.
Kind of, man, like video poker, like a hotel, like ATV trails, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But there was problems on one of his parcels of land. There was just this big pile of old coal that was dripping acid into the river. It was a big problem, and he needed it kind of cleaned up. And so I told him, I was like, actually, there's this grant that's offered by the federal government called the Aml Pilot Grant, where they'll offer you a bunch of money to clean it up, and they'll give you a whole bunch of money for your development project also, because it's really a development grant. And so he's like, well, I got all these damn dump trucks and tractors and everything already. And I'm like, oh, sweet. So I was like, all right, if we go into this, I can do all the application work. You provide the labor, the trucks, everything we need, and we'll see if we can, make it work. So he agreed, and we just went into this hard. And I devoted so much time to this, mapped out all the underground chambers that were below, the history of the mining companies, everything. And we put in an application for a seed grant, actually, from a local nonprofit or from a regional nonprofit, that their entire point of this grant is to help you to apply for the main grant from the government. So we were really expecting to get it because we had dumped so much into it, and we were so detailed, and our plan was so sound. And then we didn't get the grant, and they told us, you didn't get the grant. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And they said, but we want to have an interview with you, or we want to talk to you. And I was like, why the heck would anyone want to talk to folks?
You didn't get the job, but let's Zoom on Monday, because I want to chat.
Exactly. And I was like, what is going on? So I was like, I gotta know. So we obviously met with them, and they're like, yo, we loved your project. It's everything we would have wanted, but we're not giving money to anyone in West Virginia because the governor, Jim Justice, is so corrupt that he has co-opted the grant mechanism and only gives the money out to projects he's affiliated with.
So as you were talking about the government application process, and you kind of being the guy to do that process, because that can be super stressful. And the fact you probably to partner with a nonprofit to go through that. My mind is like asking the question, what is the relationship between people in coal country and Washington? Because the story in my head is it's not a great one. And then you tell me that it's like they can't even get funding because the governor is so corrupt on the local level that the federal funding won't even come through. So I guess like I want to go further with that question, but what is coal country? And I know I'm asking you to be an ambassador for a place that you've only spent limited amount of time in your life, but I feel like you've done a pretty good deep dive and you've met a lot of people. What's their like, how do they feel about the federal government, and more specifically, the most recent presidential administrations between Trump and Biden? Because I feel like the presidents in the United States always pander to coal country, but then when they get in, they kind of maybe don't care as much because they've got the vote. And you could say the same for the Black community. You could say the same for the Latino community. You could say the same for women. You could say the same for a lot of demographics. or minority voters, if we want to say that way, that do push candidates across the line. So I know you lived in DC for some time. So you're like a guy coming down from DC. How does this whole thing work?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of like resentment. So I would say that's the primary feeling. And you're right. So Donnie did kind of pander to the mining community and promise that he was gonna rev it back up. And obviously it was beyond him or anyone's ability to do such a thing at that time. Government intervention can have effects on industries, but you can't swim directly upstream against markets. That's not even the president can do that. So it didn't work. So you'd think there'd be more resentment towards Donnie over that, but there isn't. It's still Trumplandia, strongly Trumplandia. And Bo Jiden, his infrastructure bill that he's coming up with.
Oh, Jiden, I've never heard that.
He's actually pegged a lot of money for mine land restoration projects. So I was very excited to hear that. So a good chunk of that infrastructure is bill is supposedly gonna go to that. So that was pretty cool. And I thought that would earn him a bit more goodwill from the locals than it actually did. They'll engage with that topic a bit, but no, I think general resentment is probably the dominating emotion.
That makes sense. It was something that I was thinking before we recorded. And then when you were talking about how they make the grant process so difficult. So honestly, a lot of communities in the United States that are able to get grants, whether it's for HBCUs or it's for tribal lands, or it's even for Puerto Rico, the federal government will make it so difficult that sometimes it's hard to even get through that process. And then when you do, and you put up this awesome project and then they don't get it, and then you don't get it, that's probably be even more frustrating. So fast forward to now, are you still looking for funding from the federal government? I asked that because we've just passed an infrastructure bill today. It's probably around $1 trillion or so. And I know due to the work I'm doing that there is a lot of other money earmarked for coal country that has to do with broadband, different types of infrastructure projects, more community-based projects that are about how can we take all of this energy and put it towards something else? How can we take this human capital and put it towards something else to help lift up communities? So where are you looking now?
Yeah, so I had been sort of at the same time as I was working on getting his redneck resort built, he had told me about a more remote location up on top of this mountain about 9 miles south called the Dirty Nine. And I had fallen in love with the place before already. I had already trespassed there, and I didn't tell him that, but I kind of had fallen in love with the place, and I didn't realize that he had owned a chunk of it. So I kind of got excited by that, and we had developed such a good relationship that he kind of let me draw my own plot that I wanted to buy up there, and that he actually eventually ended up selling to me. And so that is where the Sludge Hub is going to be born, actually 9 miles south of the failed redneck resort, right on the river, the Potomac, right at the border of Maryland and West Virginia.
How big is this land?
We got 36 acres. But I'd say the whole abandoned mine area would be something like 500 acres.
And on the 36 acres, you have access to I'm assuming you have access to like a mine and a mine shaft, right?
We don't have any portals. Well, all the portals on our land are collapsed. So there's like 3 types of mines that are, it's crazy. There's like a mines on top of mines on top of mines there, because as the technology increased over the years, they found different ways to access different deposits.
Okay.
So there's contour mining, where you're essentially like cutting a strip out of the side of a mountain, like almost along a side of a ridge. There's what everyone thinks of, which is the underground mines. And then there was a strip mine there also. So it's all 3. So we've got chasms under us, edges of the mountain cut out, and the top has been stripped. So our land is about 1/3 virgin forest. That's like a real old growth stuff, a 1/3 strip mine, and then a 1/3 like rocky ravine. That's like a drainage for the whole mountain down into a stream.
And what's the plan for the land?
All kinds of stuff. So now I've reached out to once I kind of put down the deposit and I was ready to sort of start building community out there, I just got in touch with all of the kind of professionals that I've been accumulating throughout the year in the eco space and just throughout my life. All sorts of economists, engineers, data crunchers, those kinds of folks. And they're buying in. So we have made an LLC that we're buying the land under. And it's going to be a community space in that everyone who is part of the LLC has a right to access the entire land, but you are going to have a section that, you govern yourself. So I took all the most degraded lands to be the birthplace of the Sludge Hub.
So what are you hoping to build? In my mind's eye, I picture not a redneck resort, but some kind of a bungalow that can sleep a decent amount of people and a community area to eat, to hang out. The podcast's name is Wi-Fi and Water, and those are the two things I think that as humanity continues its road forward, I'm assuming you need some type of Wi-Fi, you need some type of water there. So tell me about the thinking that's going through your mind of well, how are we going to get that shit up the mountain?
Yeah, and that is a challenge. It is tough to get stuff up there. So it's going to be rugged. It's essentially a waste to reuse institute. So we're going to have people transforming cars into, makeshift dwellings. Essentially, imagine a space that you have all the amenities of a real house, but it's sort of invisible and it's outdoors. So there's not going to be any structures. No one's pouring any foundations or anything. It's going to be sort of like it'll be difficult to see. It'll be sort of an amorphous space with all the facilities being shared community facilities that are all clustered together, almost sort of like a campground, if you can imagine that. You've got your shower area. So for water, it's tough up there because we've got a lot of acid seeps and a lot of heavy metals in the water. So you got to be careful who's drinking that water. You don't want to drink that. So rainwater collection, rigs for potable water, pumps from the river for bathing, solar and methane rigs for our power. We're going to be powering our own methane devices using our own poop and anaerobic digesters that hook right up to your gas stoves. So it just pumps your poop gas right into that thing and you just cook your breakfast with it. So we're very excited about that and those kinds of things. So we've got folks involved who want to do bee apiaries and start honey operations, pollinator projects, which obviously stack on top of each other, native plant nurseries, and just wacky engineering experiments.
Like what? You can't just say wacky engineering experiment, like a trebuchet throwing a watermelon. What are we talking about here?
Like a lightning rod with a Faraday cage attached to it.
Wow.
Modifications of old mining equipment into sort of like Mad Max monster looking things to do demo derbies and other sort of heavy machinery fun.
I think referencing Mad Max sounds appropriate for the land you're going to inherit here. That sounds about right. Talk to me about your team. Who else is part of the core, or the people that are going to go up and really start to invest some time in this?
Yeah, so I think it's important to differentiate from the team in terms of the people who are buying into the LLC, who are just sort of my trusted associates, versus the people who are going to be affiliated with the nonprofit I'm launching, the Sludge Hub. So the Sludge Hub is hosted on landowner land. So I imagine it as a network that branches out, and this is just the anchor. So I am the first landowner to grant permission to the Sludge Hub to operate on my land. And we plan to get more and more landowners to agree to host projects based on the kinds of degraded lands they have and the kinds of projects that they want to go on there. So the people in the LLC are just people that I trust, to be honest. I've heard a lot of horror stories about shared land ownership and the social problems that can come out of it if you're not careful. So I've been very conservative in terms of who I allow into that kind of an arrangement. In terms of the Sludge Hub itself, I'm imagining it to be much more of an amorphous space where we have kind of artists and vagabonds coming through and cycling through, sort of like woofers, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
So we're imagining them as called auxiliaries. We're going to provide them, with all the boots they need, the food they need, the space to sleep. And they are going to work for our project leads. So we can assign them to whichever scientist needs help with whatever kind of ioncation, fluidized bed technology they're trying to play around with up there, or whatever they've got going on. So I'll be providing the project leads with essentially these laborers who are coming from undergraduate universities with heavy, they're true believers, if you will, in betterment of Earth, or eco champions as we call them. So we're gonna have a lot of them there'll be the heart and the kind of blood of the place, and then the project leads are going to be kind of running their various projects, and we'll try to have them interface positively with each other, and we'll try to have the auxiliaries learning from the project leads and perhaps taking on their own projects in the future. And those are sort of the roles that we imagine taking place once we've got the place up and running.
And like woofing, which for those listening, we're thinking, what's a woofer or what's woofing, which is working on organic farms. Is that, you're going to take a similar type of business model where it's like, come up and you're going to trade your time for a bed and food?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Very, very cool. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around, is there like one project aside from the very rare earth metal project that you said still percolating? What do you think is going to be a project that is going to draw people up to what's it called? The sexy nine, the top nine, the big nine. What's it called?
The dirty nine.
The dirty nine. Is there like, what's the project that somebody's going to see and be like, yeah, I got to go to the dirty nine for a couple of weeks? What's the thing that you are thinking might pull people up? Or is this totally a self-selection thing where it's like, there's some land where I can go do some research or support this scientist, or I can go try to do my own project? I'm just trying to figure out like, what's the calling card?
The calling card is that we want it to be like a really fun place to be, that it's a place that like people beyond just the projects that they get to do, people are just going to want to be, because it is full of stimulation and fun and social activity, and just a place that sort of people want to live. And that's sort of going to be the thing that we want to keep people there, or to draw people there.
The Dirty Nine and the land that you currently have is 36 acres, but you said that's on a larger plot of land, which is about 500 acres. And that land is that all owned by different local landowners?
Thankfully, most of it is owned by a shadow corp called the Western Pocahontas Properties Limited. So it won't be developed, thankfully.
Okay.
Pretty sure about that because I tried to buy land from them vigorously and to no avail.
Yeah, that sounds like a Cayman Island through Panama, back through the Caymans, back through Switzerland, bank situation.
Oh yeah. And the kind of interesting thing about their land up there is that it's been an unofficial ATV party zone for like 100 years.
Really?
Oh yeah. So the Dirty Nine is legendary with the locals. They got a big mud pit up there that they love to go mudding. So I was up there last weekend, and we were coming back from scouting some switchgrass operation to the north where they're doing switchgrass on an abandoned mine, and came back and just ran into like 30 partying rednecks, like so hard. Ladies like, woo, dancing, jumps out from our car, dance like it's my birthday. And we were like, oh my God. So we got just like scooped up by these people. They were like, get on, and so there we were ripping through the mud pits with these like 30 plus people, drink just down in shitty American Pilsners as one does, and got brought to like one of these ladies' birthday parties. We got brought to God knows where, closed out their birthday party, and everyone was very concerned that I was going to cut off their access to the Dirty Nine. So that was my first social challenge, I guess, is to just convince these people that like, I'm not here to stop your ATV redneck party. If anything, I'm gonna be selling you beers up there, and we're gonna be fostering this community, because that's not just like stopping them from doing what they've been doing for 100 years up there is just not in my interest. So they start calling me Mountain Jesus. So so I got a long, you can't see me in the podcast, but I just, since the pandemic, grown my beard out long, got my hair out long. Everyone called me. And so now I'm Mountain Jesus already up there. So I'm building cred slowly and steadily with the locals on the Dirty Nine.
It sounds like you almost got to see it to believe it. just one last thing that is kind of thinking about the larger area as the Sludge Hub ideally starts and is successful with the Dirty Nine and then grows out. What, from your understanding, from what people have been telling you in your travels all throughout Appalachia, but in West Virginia specifically, what do you think they need right now, if they need anything? What is the thing that you think? Now, obviously there's no silver bullet, but if there were a silver bullet, what's the one thing, or maybe that's at the top of people's list, that they would want?
Oh, like local persons?
Yeah, just, for example, in many parts of the world, people just want a job, right? The globalization is pushing jobs all around the world away from places that have a stronger currency into places that are much cheaper. And because corporations the corporations are essentially borderless now. For many people in the world we live in now, they're just like, you know what? We just want a decent job. Other people are like, hey, we just want some water. We still don't have running water. Other people are like, we need an extra boat in my village so I can get to another village and then we can increase our fish sales every month. So what's the thing maybe that you're seeing, even just in the more local area around the Dirty Nine, that you think would potentially just change things for the better, maybe?
Yeah, it is probably jobs.
Jobs. In what sector? Is there anything that people are obviously not in the coal, because we're probably transitioning out of that, we're imagining life after coal. Mm-hmm. But is it in any particular sector, or are people just trying to put food on the table? And so they're just like, just give me a job. I just want a job.
Yeah, people are not thinking about it too critically. They just want a job. And I like, for example, at that party, I talking to young fellas, like 18-year-olds and stuff. And they're like, yeah, I have to commute 2 hours to get to the nearest, good paying job. And that's the only one that we can do unless you want to go underground, and, as they call working in the mines. So yeah, the place is in contraction. So it's been shrinking every year. So it's kind of a weird thing. There's no construction, nothing's getting built. Everything's just sort of like shrinking, and the people just don't have jobs. And there's massive drug addiction problems with opiates, and there is the problems with the pollution. So that was a big part of the Sludge Hub idea, is that it's kind of an incubator for jumpstarting new industries that will reutilize the scraps left behind by the coal industry and cast them into a brighter future that supports the locals while simultaneously cleaning up the problems that have been left behind as a legacy.
If people listening, if they want to get in touch with you, obviously we connected on LinkedIn. Do you want to shout out the website? Do you have other social media? What's the best way for anyone who wants to learn more about the project to learn more?
If you really you really want to learn more about it at this stage, you can email me at thesludgehub@gmail.com. Our website isn't live yet because our 501c3 has not yet been registered, so it seems a little premature. It is built, so we'll be launching that once the organization is official. Haven't gone on Facebook or anything quite yet. We are still closing on the land, and so the way we're building it right now, we're finishing up our LLC with the people who are going to be involved in it, closing on the land. I'm going to be building the basic infrastructure for people to be able to survive there. And then we're going to be looking for our first auxiliaries and project leads to take up residence in the spring. If you're interested in either doing a project on a coal mine, or you just got a lot of gusto and you like the idea of living in a community setting where you're working hard, but you don't got to think about the project that much, and you want to be auxiliary, you can contact me at thesludgehub@gmail.com.
Well, thank you so much. And we're all waiting, we're all going to be anxiously waiting to see about the next step.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and be sure to reach out to Johnny if you're at all interested in learning more about the Sludge Hub, or you just want to support the project. You can reach him at thesludgehub@gmail.com. And another thing that Johnny shared with me once we stopped recording is that in the contract he signed for the land, there's an amendment in there that says that when he's around, he's entitled to free beer. And I just think moving forward, all professional and business contracts should have some really cool, more personalized amendments. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Wifi Water Podcast. And no matter what platform you're listening to the pod on, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks again, and we'll see everyone next time.